Helen Keller once said that life is a daring adventure or nothing. I believe that's true for me. It's about the people you meet and the experiences you have and what you do about them. A mindset really is just a story we believe, a story we tell, and if it's a good one, it makes us strong and helps us. If it's not, it weakens us and can hurt us. So I'd like to tell 3 stories to illustrate this point. First one, about my family. Before I was born, my father was a Navy pilot off of aircraft carriers in the 1950s. He came back, married my mom, was fabulously happy for about 6 months. And then calamity struck. He had a brain hemorrhage, an aneurysm. And 58 years ago, they took out brain tissue in that situation that left him more disabled. Lost speech centers, lost ability to walk, hand-to-eye coordination. Essentially, he was benched for life. And as a teenager, I was trying to figure out, how do I handle my dad in a VA hospital and nursing home, my mom a nurse working 2 different jobs, and I went down some dark roads. Downward spiral where I got into drugs and alcohol and being the class clown. And I took risks just to build my self-esteem. I actually was dared to cross the outside of this bridge as an 11-year-old. My little high-top Keds and my fingers in the chain-link fence to prove that I was brave. And I remember my hands still sweat to this day, crossing partway and beginning to lose my grip. Somehow I made it. I made it all the way across. My mom, who saw that I was going down some dangerous paths, said, maybe we'll send you off to a more structured school education. And then also suggested that I go on this Africa trip, where I spent about 6 months going through 10 countries in Africa: Tunisia, Algeria, Niger, Nigeria, Cameroon, Central Africa, Tanzania, Rwanda, Kenya. And I came back so fulfilled from the experience of the people I met and the land and the animals. I was beginning to change that DNA that was believing stories that weren't true. So I came back to tell the story. Showed slides to my father in the VA hospital. Kind of smiled and took down his slides and said, "Show these from the Navy." And I saw pictures of my father, a man I had never met, a man before the surgeries, a man who was standing powerfully in front of powerful jets on aircraft carriers, carousing with Navy buddies. And something clicked. And for the first time, I wanted to be like my father. And I realized that I had been telling a story, believing a story that wasn't true about who I was. It wasn't until years later, after college here, I went to graduate school and I learned about the heroic journey, about Joseph Campbell's telling of the stories from around the world. So I'd like to walk you through the stages of the heroic journey. And as I do, I'd like you to be thinking personally and professionally, what has brought each of you here today? What has happened for you on these paths you've taken? So the first one, we begin where the journey begins. And there's always a preparation, a place, a thing you're doing for the 5K you're trying to run, or the language you want to learn, or joining military service. There's this thing you're going to be doing to practice. And then there's a call to adventure. Something that says, come do this, come move to this city, come marry this person, come join this company. Sometimes those calls to adventure are precipitating events, things we didn't ask for, things that happened to us, like 9/11, like my father's aneurysm. And those precipitating events are a challenge of a different kind. And right before we step over that threshold to enter this new world of things we're going to face, we have to get by these guardians of the gate. And I kind of picture them as sort of giant sumo wrestlers with a Al Pacino accent. Where do you think you're going? And if you're clever enough to dodge these guys, you now enter the road of challenges, where it gets hard and harder still. But everyone listening to this has been through roads of challenges, and you have found what Joseph Campbell calls the gift. And it's like the rock geode. Inside every hard thing, there is a gift, the crystals inside. And now you've got the gift, and you're coming back to tell people about it, the magical return. You're excited, and it's usually in your head. You can't wait to tell people. And what do you slam into? Guardians of the Gate. And what do they sound like? Al Pacino. Where do you think you're going? And now we stumble across the bridge, a little humbled, to re-enter the village we left, the community, people at home, people at work, to back to where we started. But we are different. We are different from that journey. And we recognize now also the allies who were helping us in our preparation, the allies who helped us in our road of challenges, the allies who were there for us during that re-entry. And then we get to become an ally to them. So that's the loop. You learn, you grow, and you come back to share about it. But I'd like to tell another story, because I realized it's not as just important about the stages of the heroic journey. What I found really useful was figuring out how do we develop the mindset to live a heroic journey life. This story is about my wife, Tanya. August 2016, I got a phone call that we all dread getting. Honey, I have to go in for a biopsy. They think I have cancer. A vegetarian, non-drinker, non-smoker, getting throat cancer freaked us out. We couldn't believe it. And now we realize we were thrust once again on another heroic journey. We all have these forks in the road that happen to us, precipitating events that thrust us into change. But James Lane Allen, the early American writer, once said that adversity doesn't build character, it reveals it. So Tanya, with 35 radiation treatments and 3 chemo sessions set up, raised up heroic journey energy and took it on. She booted up a Caring Bridge website very quickly, and she called it Team Fierce and invited everybody to join her. It comes from the Shakespeare quote, "Though she be but little, she is fierce." And she took it on. And she wrote brave and beautiful passages about her journey and what she was learning. And people wrote back to her things that they had learned along the way. At one point, the medical team said to her, "It's going to get really hard. You won't be able to eat. The radiation is going to so inflame your throat. We need to install 2 more devices. You'll need a port that will help with the infusions, and you'll need a PEG tube, which is a food tube, very much like an IV bag of food that will drip into you." She said, "No," adamantly refused. "I can do that without that." But she looked at the fear on my face, and she said, "Okay." And she raised up her heroic journey mindset again and said, "If I'm going to take these devices, I want to rename them." So she named the port Power, and she named the PEG tube Purpose. And now she had power and purpose to travel with her on her journey. I also learned from the community that we were talking to about this that I needed to go on my own heroic journey and help as a caregiver. So I invited men that I knew, people I cared about, to come to the circle and share their stories of strength and inspiration. I want to share with you some of the things I've learned on the journey, things that have developed my heroic journey mindset and my wife's. Keep breathing and develop loose knees. Think of them as emotional shock absorbers so that we can bounce and land better. Trust, have faith, intuit, feel, reflect, and notice everything that's happening. Develop an attitude of sacred gratitude. What was seemingly a calamity for us became one of our most illuminating experiences we've ever had together. Create community. And I invite you to find ways to symbolize all of the milestones along the way. Unleash your sense of humor because you're going to need it. And last, and maybe more important, come back to pass it on to other people what you're learning. Viktor Frankl says that our attitude in the face of challenge is really the only thing that we have any control over. Tanya is not alone in her bravery. I have seen a number of close friends go through this. Mary Beth, who had a difficult bout with breast cancer, she'd put on boxing mitts and go in there for her infusions to encourage the other women there. Girls, we're fighting today. Don, who recently lost his true love, his soulmate, who was shot, his fiancée, 2 months before they were getting married. His ability to show up with grit and grace since then has been incredible. My friend Michael, a year longer than the doctors think he could live with a brain tumor, rides his bicycle every day to go down to the river to look at blue herons and tell us stories of inspiration. A third story, and this is yours. I'd like you to think about your lives and where you are and what you have done and how you might trade the stories you've been telling, like I did, that were taking us down, making us weaker. Tell it again. Tell it through the preparation, the road of challenges. Find the gifts so that as you come back, you're bringing back to your life something that you've discovered. I know if you're like me, you've heard a number of those times, voices in your heads. I can't do this. It's too hard. Next time you heard yourself say, I can't, I invite you to try to add this next phrase. When you say, I can't, I'd like you to add ... until now. Until now. I wish you well on your heroic journeys. Thank you.